stop looking up at the clouds. Seriously. Stop thinking about satellites orbiting in space beaming down your Instagram feed. Because here's what nobody tells you about the internet. It's not floating around in the sky at all. It's lying on the bottom of the ocean. Right now, as you're watching this video, your data is traveling through cables on the seafloor. Thin glass threads, thinner than a garden hose, sitting in the dark 3 miles underwater, carrying literally everything. Every text message, every Netflix binge, every Zoom call, all of it goes through cables under the ocean. And if you think that sounds crazy, wait till you hear what keeps these cables working and what happens when they break. In the next 20 minutes, you're going to understand something that changes how you see the entire modern world. Because the internet isn't this magical cloud thing. It's physical, it's vulnerable, and it's way more interesting than anyone ever told you. Here's what's really happening right now. You probably think your data bounces off satellites, right? That's what it looks like in the movies. Some guy types on a keyboard, data shoots up to space, beams back down across the world. Done. But that's not how it works. Not even close. Satellites handle about 1% of global internet traffic. 1%. Everything else? Under the ocean. Think about it this way. When you send a message to your friend in London, that message doesn't go up. It goes down. Down to a cable buried under your street. That cable connects to a bigger cable. That bigger cable runs to the coast, and then it dives into the ocean and travels along the seafloor all the way across the Atlantic to Europe. Your cat video literally swims across the ocean, and you never even knew it. Here's where it gets wild. There are over 500 of these cables crisscrossing the ocean floor right now. They connect every continent except Antarctica. They're everywhere. If you could drain all the water from the oceans, you'd see this insane spider web of cables wrapping around the entire planet. Some are as short as 80 miles. Others stretch over 12,000 miles across the Pacific. And together, they carry about 10 terabits of data per second. That's enough bandwidth to download every movie ever made in about 3 minutes. But here's what nobody talks about. These cables are fragile, like surprisingly fragile. They're about as thick as a garden hose. The core is just glass fibers bundled together. Then there's some protective layers. Sure, steel wires, copper sheathing, plastic coating. But at the end of the day, it's still just a cable lying exposed on the ocean floor. And stuff happens to them all the time. Ships drop anchors and rip them apart. Earthquakes shift the seafloor and snap them. Fishing trawlers drag nets across them and tear through the protective layers. And yes, sharks bite them. That's real. Scientists found teeth marks in damaged cables pulled up for repairs. Nobody knows exactly why sharks attack internet cables. Maybe they're curious about the electromagnetic field. Maybe they think it's food. But it happens enough that cable companies had to start wrapping cables in special shark-resistant materials in areas where attacks were common. And when a cable breaks, things get real bad real fast. In 2008, 2 cables in the Mediterranean got cut within days of each other. Egypt and India lost about 70% of their internet connectivity. Millions of people couldn't get online. Businesses shut down. Banks couldn't process transactions. It took weeks to fix. All because of 2 cables. Here's what I call the invisible dependency. We've built our entire modern world on top of these underwater cables. The global economy runs on them. Stock markets, banking systems, cloud computing. All your photos, supposedly in the cloud, they're in data centers connected by these cables. Every single video call, every work from home job, every online purchase, it all depends on glass threads at the bottom of the ocean that most people don't even know exist. And the crazy part? We keep adding more. Tech companies are laying new cables constantly. Google has laid over 100,000 miles of cable. Facebook built cables connecting the US to Europe and Asia. Amazon's getting in the game now too, because bandwidth demand keeps growing. Every year we stream more video, upload more photos, rely more heavily on cloud services, and satellites can't handle it. Satellite internet is slow and expensive and has latency issues. If you've ever been on a Zoom call with someone using satellite internet, you know there's that delay, that awkward pause where you're both starting to talk at the same time. That happens because the signal has to travel 22,000 miles up to space and back down. With undersea cables, data moves at about 2/3 the speed of light through glass. It's fast, really fast. But here's where things get even more interesting. Laying these cables is absolutely insane. You can't just drop a cable off a boat and let it sink. The ocean floor isn't flat. There are mountains underwater, valleys, trenches that go down 7 miles deep, underwater volcanoes. The cable has to follow the contour of the seafloor, and it has to avoid certain areas entirely. You can't run cables through active earthquake zones if you can avoid it. You have to route around underwater volcanoes. You need to stay away from shipping lanes where anchors might hit you. And you have to negotiate with every country whose territorial waters you pass through. So here's how it actually works. There are these specialized ships called cable-laying vessels. They're massive. Some are over 500 feet long. They have enormous tanks that hold thousands of miles of cable coiled up like the world's biggest garden hose, and they have this plow device that can bury cable in the seafloor in shallow water near coastlines. Because that's where most damage happens. Ships anchor there, fishermen work there, so you bury the cable under the sand and rocks to protect it. But in deep water, you don't bury it. You just lay it on the seafloor. The ship moves at about 6 miles per hour, slowly feeding out cable as it goes. Robot submarines go down first to survey the route and make sure there's no obstacles. Then the ship follows that exact path, laying cable. It takes weeks to cross an ocean, sometimes months. And the whole time, engineers are monitoring the cable as it goes down, making sure the signal quality stays good. And here's the thing that blew my mind when I learned this. These cables are installed by tiny teams, like 20 people on a ship, 20 people laying infrastructure that will carry trillions of dollars of economic activity. Think about that. A couple dozen engineers and sailors are out in the middle of the ocean, thousands of miles from land, slowly unreeling a cable that will connect continents. And if they screw up, if the cable gets damaged during installation, they have to pull the whole thing back up and start over. The pressure is enormous. But here's what makes this even more wild. When a cable breaks after it's installed, these same ships have to go fix it. And the repair process is insane. First, they have to figure out exactly where the break is. They do this by sending signals down the cable and measuring how long it takes for the signal to bounce back. That tells them the distance to the break. Then they sail to that location, and they send down a grappling hook, a literal grappling hook. They drag it along the seafloor until it catches on the cable. Then they winch it up. This can take hours, sometimes days. You're pulling up a cable from 3 miles underwater. Once they get it to the surface, they cut out the damaged section and splice in new cable. Then they lower it all back down. The whole repair can take a week or more, and during that time, internet traffic has to reroute through other cables, which slows everything down. Now, here's where I need you to really pay attention, because there's this pattern I've noticed that changes how you think about the entire internet. I call it the concentration paradox. We think of the internet as this distributed, redundant system. Like if one part fails, traffic just routes around it. And that's technically true. But in practice, there are these incredible choke points, places where all the cables have to pass through. The Suez Canal is one. 15 cables pass through that narrow waterway connecting Europe to Asia. If something happened there, if those cables got cut, internet traffic between continents would crawl. Egypt learned this the hard way. In 2008, a ship's anchor cut through cables near Alexandria. The country lost most of its connectivity for weeks. Or look at the Strait of Malacca between Malaysia and Indonesia. Huge percentage of Asia's internet traffic funnels through cables in that narrow passage. It's a natural choke point. And it's not just accidents you have to worry about. During times of conflict, countries have considered cutting undersea cables as an act of warfare. Russia has ships that apparently just cruise around mapping where cables are. China's doing the same thing because if you know where the cables are, you know where to strike to cause maximum disruption. And this matters because your entire life depends on these cables working. Your job probably requires internet, your bank account is managed through these cables, your retirement fund trades stock through them. The hospital you'd go to in an emergency uses them to access medical records. The supply chain that delivers food to your grocery store coordinates through them. Everything connects back to these glass threads underwater. Here's what most people don't realize. When we talk about the cloud, we're talking about physical data centers connected by physical cables. Your photos aren't floating in the ether. They're stored on hard drives in a warehouse in Oregon or Virginia or wherever, and those warehouses connect to the internet through these undersea cables. If the cables go down, the cloud goes down, and suddenly all your digital stuff is unreachable. But there's something even deeper going on here. Something about human psychology and how we think about technology. I call this the abstraction illusion. We've gotten so good at building layers of abstraction on top of physical reality that we forget the physical reality exists at all. You tap your phone and a video loads instantly, so your brain treats that like magic. The physical journey that data takes, traveling through cell towers and fiber optic lines and undersea cables and server farms, all of that becomes invisible. And when something's invisible, you don't think about protecting it. You don't think about how vulnerable it might be. This happens with everything, by the way. You flip a light switch and don't think about the power plant burning coal, or the transmission lines carrying electricity, or the transformer on your street. You turn on the tap and don't think about the reservoir and the treatment plant and the pipes under your street. We abstract away all the infrastructure that makes modern life possible. And that makes us fragile, because we don't understand what we depend on. Let me tell you about two different approaches to this problem. Meet Sarah. Sarah works at a tech startup in San Francisco. Her company runs entirely on cloud services. Every file is in Google Drive. Every conversation happens in Slack. All their code is on GitHub. Their customers access their product through web browsers. And Sarah never once thought about where any of that data actually lives or how it travels. Why would she? It just works. Click a button, stuff happens. The infrastructure is completely invisible to her. Then one day, an undersea cable between the US and Japan gets cut by an earthquake. Sarah's company has customers in Japan. Suddenly, those customers can't access the product. Pages load slowly or not at all. Customer support tickets flood in. Sarah's boss is freaking out. And Sarah realizes for the first time that her entire business depends on cables she didn't know existed being intact on the ocean floor halfway around the world. She has no backup plan. She never thought she needed one. Because in her mind, the internet just worked. It was reliable until it wasn't. Now compare that to Marcus. Marcus runs infrastructure for a financial services company. His company trades stocks, manages portfolios, processes billions of dollars in transactions daily, and Marcus understands exactly how fragile the internet is. He knows about the undersea cables, he knows about the choke points, he knows that when cables get cut, traffic slows down. And in his business, speed matters. If their trading algorithms are even milliseconds slower than competitors, they lose money. Lots of money. So Marcus built redundancy into everything. His company uses multiple internet providers. They have dedicated fiber lines to major exchanges. They have backup routes through different cables. If one path slows down, traffic automatically shifts to another path. And Marcus monitors cable status constantly. When he hears about earthquakes near major cable routes, he's already checking for damage reports. When new cables get laid, he evaluates whether they could provide better routes. He treats the physical infrastructure of the internet as mission critical, because for him, it is. Notice how Sarah and Marcus had totally different relationships with the same technology? Sarah abstracted it away until reality forced her to see the infrastructure. Marcus never let himself forget that infrastructure existed. And when problems hit, Marcus was ready and Sarah wasn't. Here's what's really going on here. It's not actually about being paranoid or obsessing over infrastructure details most people ignore. It's about understanding leverage points. Every system has parts that matter more than others, parts where small failures cause big consequences. In the internet, undersea cables are one of those leverage points. Most people can ignore them because most of the time they work fine. But people whose lives or businesses depend on the internet staying fast and reliable, they can't afford to ignore the physical reality underneath the abstraction. And once you see this pattern, you see it everywhere. The handful of companies that manufacture computer chips, the specific routes oil tankers take from the Middle East, the aging electrical grid that hasn't been upgraded in decades. These are all invisible dependencies holding up visible systems we rely on, and most of us never think about them until they fail. But here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to admit. We've built a global economy and a modern way of life that requires everything to work perfectly all the time. And perfect isn't how reality works. Cables break, ships hit things, earthquakes happen, sharks bite cables for reasons we don't fully understand. And every time something breaks, we scramble to fix it and go back to pretending it won't break again. But it will. It always does. Think about everything we've uncovered here. The internet runs through cables on the ocean floor. Those cables are fragile and exposed. Breaking them can cut off entire countries. Fixing them takes weeks. And most people have no idea any of this exists. We've built modern civilization on top of invisible infrastructure that we don't maintain well enough, or understand deeply enough, or protect carefully enough. The question isn't whether these cables will get cut again. They will. Dozens of cables get damaged every year. The question is whether we're ready for it when it happens. Whether businesses have backup plans, whether countries have redundant routes, whether anyone's thinking seriously about what happens if multiple major cables go down at once. Because that's the real vulnerability here. Not that one cable breaks. It's that we've made ourselves so dependent on this infrastructure working that we can't function without it anymore. Your parents could probably survive a week without internet if they had to. Could you? Could your job function? Could the hospital treat you? Could your bank give you your money? So next time you're streaming a show on Netflix, or video calling your friend overseas, or just scrolling Instagram, ask yourself something. Do you know where that data is actually traveling? Do you know what would happen if the cables carrying it broke? Because once you see that your entire digital life depends on glass threads at the bottom of the ocean, you can't unsee it. And maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe understanding what we depend on is the first step to protecting it better, or at least appreciating how wild it is that any of this works at all.